Hi there. So it's been a while since I've done a dev blog on splines, and what I wanted to go over is what I've been building recently. The spline I've made here is quite simple, but it's quite expandable. So we'll delete that, and we'll go through the process of what it's like adding a spline into the world. What I want the spline to do is basically eventually take the player character, and it will act as like a roller coaster ride. So, if we start making points, we can press Alt and we'll add extra points. Now you see that my spline has a few options. It has arrays, so it tells you each local point. So every time I make one of these, I'll update the array, add an extra element. I can then close the loop and it will circle it. And if I also pick loop around spline, it will be like a never-ending track. If, for example, I was to move this one, it wouldn't update the location. So I made a function where if I just press update, it will change the numbers. This eventually I want to put more functionality into later, but having it stored like this, it allows me to know the total distance of the array, and that's the distance to the next point, and the distance between each one of the points. So with Unreal, you have two basic scripts. You have a construction script and an event graph. The event graph what happens in playtime, and I'm using the event tick and also a little bit of event begin play. But we won't go into that just yet. What we will do is we'll look at the construction script if it lets me. Where is the construction script? There we go. So we'll ignore all that because I've optimized it a lot. So on the construction script, the first thing we do is we get the function set closed loop, which can be from the spline, and come in here and you go loop, not lop, loop. So here you go, is closed loop and set closed loop. And then I just made a boolean where it's public, so I can choose is closed or isn't. This is something I'm working on because I want to bring in a VR controller. And under the spline, there's a lot of functionality you can get. So you can get spline points, you can add points, clear points. There's a lot of things you can do within splines. But what I'm doing over here is I'm just getting the total number of spline points and I'm setting it. Then I am adding a static mesh just for visualization. This isn't important at this point. And what that does is it just spawns a cube with the relative transform with a variable here that I've named point control, which is a float. And what this float does is it goes along time and distance, well, location at time, and just returns a relative transform location on the spline itself. I then made a new function which is array setting, and in this setting the first thing it does is it does a check where is the total number of points greater than or equal to the total number of points. If it is, then you know it needs to update the array and set it to 0, set the update back to 0, so this will only function once when something's changed. And the first thing you want to do, and this was a bit of a head scratcher for me, is you want to clear everything inside the array. Otherwise, in the construction script, it's always firing. So although you only have 2 points, it could give you 8, 16, or whatever points. So you just want the points that are really there. So then what happens is we cycle through the for loop. We subtract 1 because we start from 0. So we know that there's 5 points. So for each point, we get the spline point. We get its vector. We add it to the array, and we do the same thing for distance. But the only difference is we do a distance vector, so we compare the variables between the two. So you'll see that it's looping through the array, and it'll have 1 there, and then it will look at what the next one is, and then you'll get the distance to the next point. And then it will just cycle through. When it's cycling through, it will add each one of the distances so you get the total distance. So if we press compile and we go back to the play menu, you'll see that there is point control, which is here. You'll see that the cube, which I said earlier doesn't matter too much, moves along the point. But that isn't so important. What's really important is the skeletal mesh. So if we go back to the spline and now we go to the event graph, you'll see that on every tick you've got the spline walk speed, and you multiply it with delta time, and you add it to the float, the distance along the spline for the actor, and then you set it. So every second it's coming along and it's multiplying, and it's just incrementally walking along. Then set relative transform, and it takes the spline and the distance along the spline. And using a different YouTube video that I found, it basically plugs all these into here, and you just add different variables. But this is also going to have to add into movement for rotation, so you can look left and right while you're on the spline itself, which I haven't done yet. And then the loop logic, which I created, is an AND. So if you want it to loop around the spline and it's a closed loop, then this can be true. And if it's true, if the distance is greater than the total length of the spline, then we know we basically hit the end of the spline. So what we want to do is just set that back to 0. So then what will happen is if we press play,
running, running, I'm running, running, I'm running, 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 I'm running, running, I'm running, 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 I'm running, running, I'm running, 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 running.
you'll run around. Another few bits and bobs that I did was I created a event. So when you start, there's a start time delay, which I've done as 1 second, which is a variable so it can be changed. So after that 1 second, it will set it from walking to running speed, and it will play an audio song, which you can then insert here. It also does a little bit more math, and it gets the length of the sound. This was not the easiest thing in the world to do, and I had to, I forgot even how I did this. It's not that one. No. But yeah, that's kind of important. This. Read the sound variable. The sound should be saved. Saved. And then that way you can actually get the reference from the sound, so you can get length, etc. Duration, sorry. So I hope that was helpful when you get into understand the difference between event graph and construction, and how splines can work. And just in case if you wanted to know, to make another point, just press Alt, left click, and you create a new point for each one. So then that way if you made a pretty world and you want your character to run to certain points of the world, you just draw these points in the world and it will walk to it. So yeah, that's a dev diary throughout Christmas and the start of the year.